Your tomato plants can look healthy, vigorous, and full of flowers, and still stop producing fruit. You watered consistently. You fertilized on schedule. You watched those plants climb, green and thriving, exactly the way every gardening video told you they should. And then you stood there in July waiting for tomatoes that never came. That is not bad luck. That is biology. And once you understand the biology, actually understand it, not just it was too hot, you will never stand in front of a stalled tomato plant feeling helpless again. I am going to give you 3 reasons your tomatoes are not fruiting, the mechanism behind each one, and a fix for each that you can start today. And I am saving the best one for the end. It is something almost nobody in gardening talks about. It takes 30 seconds a day, and it can restart a plant that has been completely stalled for weeks. Stay with me. Here is the thing about tomatoes that changes everything. The plant is not passive. It is not sitting there failing to produce fruit because something went wrong. It is actively making a decision, a survival calculation based on the signals it is receiving from the environment around it. Temperature signals, nutrient signals, pollination signals. And when those signals say conditions are not right for offspring to survive, the plant does something very deliberate. It drops the flowers. On purpose. That process has a name, abscission, and it is triggered by ethylene, a gas the plant produces itself when it reads stress. The flower stem weakens, separates cleanly, and falls. The plant is not sick. It is conserving resources. It is waiting for better conditions. Your job, the only job, is to understand what signal is wrong and correct it. 3 signals, 3 reasons. Reason 1, temperature stress. Most people have heard this one. Fewer people understand what is actually happening inside the flower when temperatures go wrong. Tomato pollen has a viability window. When daytime temperatures push consistently above approximately 95 degrees Fahrenheit, the pollen becomes non-viable. It is still there. The flower looks perfect. But the pollen will not fertilize anything. It has been degraded by heat before it ever got the chance. At the same time, if nighttime temperatures drop below about 55 degrees Fahrenheit, pollen tube elongation fails. The pollen lands on the stigma, makes contact, and then simply cannot grow downward to reach the egg. A few days pass. The plant abscisses the flower. Nothing visible went wrong. The plant just knew. This is why gardeners across Georgia, Louisiana, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Gulf Coast have been reporting brutal seasons. It is not just the afternoon heat. It is the combination days clearing 95 degrees sterilizing the pollen. Nights staying warm enough to feel fine, but not cool enough for the plant to reset. The plant looks magnificent. The failure is happening at a scale you cannot see. 2 levers here. First, shade cloth, 30 to 40%. Shade over the plants during the 2 to 4 hottest afternoon hours brings leaf temperature down enough to protect pollen development. Not perfect. Better than nothing. And often enough. Second, variety. Heat-set varieties like Heatmaster, Solar Fire, and Florida 91 were bred specifically for pollen viability at higher temperatures. If you are in Zone 9 or warmer, and you are growing a classic variety developed for New England summers, that mismatch is built into the seed. One thing worth saying directly, I have heard from gardeners in Alabama who never use shade cloth and harvest tomatoes every year. They are not wrong. In certain microclimates, with the right variety and deep consistent soil moisture, the plant gets just enough margin to work with. What I am giving you is a diagnostic lens, not a universal prescription. The question is always, are my daytime temperatures regularly clearing 95? If yes, temperature stress belongs in your diagnosis. Reason 2, nitrogen overload. This one catches people off guard. Because the plant looks incredible, deep green leaves, thick stems, new growth pushing out fast. Everything a gardener wants to see except fruit. No flowers, or flowers that open and drop without setting. If that is your situation, there is a strong chance you have flipped a hormonal switch inside the plant that is directing all available energy away from reproduction and into vegetative expansion. Here is why it happens. Nitrogen drives leaf and stem growth. When nitrogen is abundant in the root zone, the plant reads that as a signal to keep growing more leaf surface to capture light, More stem structure, more root to absorb more nitrogen. In evolutionary terms, that makes sense. A plant with access to rich nitrogen sources should capitalize on them. Fruiting can wait. The ratio that matters is nitrogen relative to phosphorus and potassium. Heavy nitrogen dominance keeps auxin levels elevated and suppresses the cytokinin activity that initiates flowering. The plant is not ignoring reproduction. It genuinely does not have the hormonal signal to begin it. How do you get here? A few common ways. You used a general-purpose fertilizer all season without switching to a lower nitrogen formula at flowering stage. You added fresh compost or manure that was high in available nitrogen. Or you added a nitrogen-heavy amendment earlier in the season to fix yellowing, and the soil is still loaded months later. Fix it in 2 steps. Stop adding nitrogen immediately. Switch to a fertilizer where phosphorus leads something in the range of the 10th of May, 2010 or 2.84. Phosphorus is the signal toward root development and flower set. Potassium supports the process and feeds into fruit quality. If you are in containers and the soil is genuinely overloaded, a heavy flush with plain water over 2 or 3 days can leach excess nitrogen out of the root zone. Not a complete fix. A meaningful start, and here is something simple from your own kitchen. Soak clean banana peels in water for a day or 2, then pour that water at the base of the plant. Banana peels are high in potassium, low in nitrogen, a small but real shift in the direction you need. With 0 cost. Reason 3, pollination failure. Tomato flowers are self-fertile. The pollen and the egg are in the same flower. That sounds like it should make pollination automatic. It is not. The pollen is housed inside an anther cone, a tight, enclosed structure, and it requires mechanical vibration to be released. In nature, that vibration comes from wind and from bees, particularly bumblebees, which vibrate at a frequency almost precisely tuned to release tomato pollen. The technical term is buzz pollination, or sonication. Without it, the pollen stays locked inside the cone. The flower opens, waits, and drops. In a sheltered garden surrounded by fencing, under a patio cover, inside a greenhouse, you can have a plant loaded with open flowers and almost no pollination happening. Simply because nothing is shaking them, humidity makes this worse. When relative humidity climbs above about 80% common across the southeastern United States in July and August, tomato pollen becomes sticky and clumps together. It cannot release from the cone. Even if it does release, it does not transfer cleanly to the stigma. At the other extreme, when humidity drops below about 40%, the pollen desiccates too dry to adhere and germinate. The workable window is narrower than most people realize. This is the mechanism behind what gardeners in Philadelphia and Houston described as a 1-to-2 punch. Heat above 95 degrees degrading pollen viability. High humidity simultaneously preventing the viable pollen that remains from transferring correctly. Both problems happening at once. The plant drops everything. Practical response: keep foliage dry during pollination hours. Water at the soil level in the morning, not overhead, so the root zone gets moisture and the flowers stay dry through the warmest part of the day. And if you are not seeing pollinators working, the flowers start helping them. Which brings me to the bonus. Before I give you the bonus fix, I want you to see what these 3 reasons have in common. Temperature stress blocks fertilization. Nitrogen overload suppresses flower initiation. Pollination failure prevents fertilization from completing. 3 different entry points. Some exit. The plant reads the signal, produces ethylene, drops the flower, and waits. So the diagnosis is always the same 3 questions. What have my temperatures been doing? What have I been feeding this plant? And when am I confident pollination is actually happening in my garden? Ask those 3 questions in order. The answer to one of them, sometimes more than one, will tell you exactly where to apply pressure. Take an electric toothbrush, turn it on. Hold the vibrating head gently against the back of an open flower for about 2 seconds, and move to the next one. Do this once every morning, ideally between 9 and 11, while temperatures are moderate and the flowers are dry. Work through every open flower on the plant. That vibration is buzz pollination. You are replacing the mechanical input the plant evolved to receive from bumblebees. In a garden or a season where those bees are absent, too hot to be active, or simply not present in enough numbers, Gardeners who started doing this during stalled summers reported fruit setting within a week on plants that had shown nothing for weeks. It works because it is not a trick, it is giving the plant exactly the physical signal it has always needed. No electric toothbrush, a small dry brush or cotton swab, swirled gently inside each open flower and then moved to the next. Works on the same principle. Slower. Still effective. Do it every morning, through every flower's 3-day open window, and you will see the difference. Your tomato plant is not giving up. It is waiting. Temperature inside the viable range. Nutrients balanced toward fruiting. Pollen released and transferred. When those 3 signals arrive together, the plant does what it has always done. It sets fruit. It does not need to be convinced or forced. It needs the conditions that make the decision easy. That is the real answer to why tomatoes stop producing fruit even when the plant looks completely healthy. It is not a disease. It is not a deficiency you missed. It is a plant that is growing leaves but no fruit because one of those 3 signals is missing, and once you find which one, you know exactly how to increase tomato yield without guessing. Tomato blossom drop causes tomato fruit set problems, tomato pollination problems. Heat stress on tomatoes, they all trace back to the same shutdown mechanism. The plant reads a signal it does not like, produces ethylene, and abscisses the flower before fertilization completes. Tomato flowers but no fruit is not random. It is a decision, and decisions can be reversed. Fix the temperature window. Fix the nutrient ratio. Fix the pollination gap. Do all 3 if you need to. Most gardeners dealing with healthy tomato plants and no tomatoes are dealing with 2 of these at once without realizing it. Usually heat stress combined with either a nitrogen imbalance or a pollination problem that got worse because bees stopped working the flowers during the hottest part of the day. Give it those conditions. The tomatoes follow.